The night I drove Nora Calloway home from the office holiday party, she had one heel missing, lip gloss on her chin, and absolutely no idea she had just spent 40 minutes telling me I was the most insufferable person she had ever worked with. In that order, my name is Daniel Carr. I'm 31. I work in product development for a mid-sized tech company downtown, and for 2 years running, the only thing standing between me and what I actually wanted at work was the woman currently asleep in my passenger seat with her cheek against the window and her coat half on and half off like she had lost a fight with it. I should back up. Nora and I had been rivals in the way that only happens in offices with open floor plans and forced proximity, not enemies, not friends. Something worse, that specific kind of person who existed in your peripheral vision every day, who made your coffee lukewarm by running the machine before you got there, whose name appeared above yours on every performance board, every quarterly ranking, every casual mention from management, and who somehow always looked like she had slept 8 hours when you knew for a fact you were both in the building until 9 the night before. She sat 3 desks over. Her monitor was slightly larger than mine for reasons nobody ever explained. She organized her pens by color, which I found deeply suspicious. And she argued with my ideas in meetings with this specific calm, precise way that made it worse than if she had just yelled. Like she had already considered my point 3 steps before I said it out loud and filed it under things that needed correction. We were polite, that was the thing. We were perfectly, thoroughly, exhaustingly polite. The kind of polite that requires more energy than actual hostility. Good morning, Daniel. Good morning, Nora. Nice presentation, you too. Both of us smiling just enough, neither of us meaning it completely. The office called us the odd couple without ever saying it to our faces. I heard it once from the guy in accounting who thought the copier room was soundproof. He was wrong. So when my manager announced the holiday party was mandatory attendance, no exceptions, dress code, business casual, I made one decision. I was going to show up, drink 1 glass of wine, spend 30 minutes being visible, and leave before anything became a story I had to explain later. That was the plan. Nora had apparently made a different plan. The party was in the rooftop event space 2 floors above the office, which meant everyone was already aware it existed, but nobody had ever been allowed up there before. Somebody had hung string lights. The food was good enough to distract people from the open bar, but not so good that it stopped them. By 9 o'clock, the volume in the room had gone up by 30%, and 2 people from legal were doing something on the dance floor that would definitely be discussed in Monday's water cooler conversation. I found the quietest corner near the window with a good view of the city and a clear sightline to the exit. I had my 1 glass of wine. I was watching the clock with the patience of a man who had a plan. Then Nora appeared at the bar. She was wearing a dark green dress I had never seen before, which was a strange thing to notice, but I noticed it. Her hair was down, which was also strange because she always kept it up at work, that particular kind of professional knot that said do not waste my time before she had even spoken. Down, it was longer than I expected. She said something to the bartender that made him laugh. She did not look like she had a plan. She looked like she had decided the party was hers and was working from that assumption outward. I looked away. 20 minutes later, she was beside me. Not talking to me, standing nearby, looking at the same window, holding a glass that was notably less full than it had been at the bar. You're hovering near the exit, she said without looking at me. Strategically positioned, I said. She looked at me then. There was a small smile on her face that I did not trust at all. So you came to a party and chose to stand as close to leaving as possible without actually leaving. That's an accurate summary, yes. She turned back to the window, me too. We stood there for a minute without talking. The noise of the party filled the space between us. A song came on that I recognized but could not name. Somewhere behind us, someone knocked over a glass and the whole room went ooh the way rooms do when they are loose and warm and looking for anything to react to. What do you want for Christmas, Daniel? She said it flat, like a joke without the punchline yet. I looked at her. For you to stop CCing Marcus on emails before you've talked to me first. She laughed, actually laughed. Not the polite one she used in meetings, a real one, quick and surprised, like it had slipped out before she could make a professional decision about it. I want the Miller account to stop being your backup plan when your original ideas don't get approved, she said. My original ideas get approved just fine. They get modified, that's different. They get built, that's what matters. She looked at me with that expression. the one I had seen in 17 different meetings, considering, weighing, slightly amused by something she was not going to say out loud. Then she took a longer drink from her glass than I think she intended. That was around 9:30. By 10, the party had reached a volume that made conversation optional, and Nora had apparently made some kind of separate decision between the window and the bar, because the glass she was holding looked newer than the last time I checked. She was talking to people more easily than I expected, laughing at things I was too far away to hear, looking genuinely like she was having a better time than she had arrived prepared for. I was still near the exit. I had finished my one glass and was debating whether leaving at 10 was early enough to be noticed or late enough to be polite. Then I heard my name. Danielle. I turned. Our manager, Greg, was cutting through the crowd toward me with the specific expression he wore when he wanted a favor dressed up as a suggestion. He was a decent manager. He was also the kind of man who could not resist involving himself in situations. Hey, he said, good party, right? Great party. Listen. He lowered his voice just enough to be conspicuous. Nora's had a little more than usual tonight. I tried to get her a car, but she's convinced her apartment is walking distance and it's really not, and I have to stay because I'm technically the host and I just need someone she trusts to make sure she gets home okay. He said someone she trusts like it was the obvious choice. I looked at him. Greg, she doesn't trust me. He looked back at me with this expression that said that is not what I have observed from my manager vantage point, but I am not going to say that out loud. Just get her in a car, he said, or walk her out. She won't let any of the women from the team help. She's convinced she's fine. I looked across the room to where Nora was currently explaining something to an empty chair. She had one heel off and was holding it in one hand like evidence. I understood why he had come to me. I was just not happy about it. Okay, I said, because what else do you say? Getting Nora out of the party took 11 minutes and most of my patience. She was not belligerent. That would have been easier. She was cheerful and extremely mobile and had a lot of opinions about why she did not need help. Her shoes were fine, the distance was fine. The night air was going to fix everything and she just needed to find her other heel, which she was certain was near the bar. It was under the speaker. I found it. I handed it to her. She looked at it like a puzzle. These are bad shoes, she said. You wore them here. Tactical error. She tried to put it back on and caught my arm for balance without asking. Her hand was warm through my jacket. She straightened up and let go and looked at me with an expression that was thinking harder than the rest of her was managing. You came to help me, she said. I was near the door anyway. Sure. She studied me with the specific focus of someone trying to remember if they trusted a person. I could see her working through it. You never do anything without a reason, she said. I'm doing this one. That answer seemed to cost her a calculation she could not quite finish. She looked at the shoe in her hand, then back at me. Okay, she said, okay. Getting her into my car was straightforward. She was quiet on the stairs, concentrated, holding the railing with one hand and her shoes with the other. Outside, the cold hit and she blinked like it surprised her. She pulled her coat tighter and stopped on the sidewalk and looked up at the sky for a second like she was checking something. Stars, she said. There aren't any. We're downtown. I know, I'm disappointed. I opened the passenger door. She looked at it, then at me with that considering expression. Then she got in. I closed the door, went around to the driver's side and gave her address to my phone. She lived 20 minutes away. Not walking distance under any honest interpretation. She was quiet for 4 of those minutes, then she started talking. The thing about you, she said, staring at the windshield, is that you make everything look easy and you know that it's annoying. I kept my eyes on the road. I work at it. That's worse. She shifted in her seat, because I work at things too. I work extremely hard at things, and you make it look like you woke up that way, and that makes me want to prove I'm better, which makes me seem competitive, which I'm not. I'm not competitive, I'm just precise. You're very competitive. I'm precise, she said with dignity. The car was quiet for another minute. You know what Marcus said to me in October, she said. He said you had good instincts, just like that, good instincts. Like instincts are something you're born with and not something you build. I have good instincts. I have excellent instincts. I have been building my instincts for 7 years. You have good instincts, I said. She turned to look at me. Don't do that. It's true. You're only saying it because I'm drunk and you feel sorry for me. I'm saying it because it's true, and because you say it to me never. The word never hung in the car longer than I expected. She turned back to the window. The city moved past. Her reflection looked at her from the dark glass. You're actually not that bad, she said quietly. That's the problem. I did not answer that one. I was not sure what to do with it, and the street was narrow, and I needed both hands on the wheel anyway. She fell asleep 4 minutes from her apartment. Not gradually, just gone, cheek against the window, her coat half off one shoulder, her shoes still in her lap. I stopped at a light and looked at her for 1 second longer than necessary. She looked younger when she was not running calculations behind her eyes. I parked outside her building, which was a 4-story place with a green awning and a buzzer panel that had too many names on it. I turned off the engine. She did not wake up. Nora, nothing. I said her name again. She moved slightly, then settled. Her hand was still on her coat. I sat there for a moment with a real problem. She had her purse with her phone in it, but I did not know her code and I did not know which apartment, and the sensible thing was to wake her up, hand her off, and leave. That was the plan. Instead, I said her name again, louder this time, and she opened her eyes and looked at me like she was calculating how she had arrived here. We're at your building, I said. She blinked twice. Oh, she sat up straighter and looked out the windshield. Oh. What's your apartment number? She told me, 3rd floor. She found her keys in her purse with the specific focus of someone who has had to be very careful about not dropping things. I walked her to the door because the sidewalk had an uneven section near the steps and she was still in her shoes and I had already found them once tonight. She buzzed herself in. I held the door. She looked at me in the lobby light. You don't have to come up, she said. I know. She looked at the elevator. I'm fine now. You just woke up in a parking spot. She almost smiled at that. Fair. The elevator was small and slow, and we stood slightly apart in the way people do when a space is too small to feel natural in. She was looking at the number display above the door. I was looking at the seam in the floor and thinking about how strange it was to be in an elevator with Nora Calloway after 2 years of being in the same building, and never once being this close for this long without a conference table between us. The door opened on 3. She led the way down the hall. Her door was at the end, painted a slightly different shade of white than the others, like it had been repainted at a different time and nobody had bothered to match it perfectly. She got the key in on the 2nd try. The door opened, and her roommate was standing in the kitchen directly in our eyeline, holding a mug of something warm, wearing pajamas with small foxes on them, looking at me the way you look at something that confirms a theory you have been sitting on for a while. She was about Nora's age, dark hair, bare feet, the expression of someone who was awake too late specifically because she had been curious. Oh, the roommate said. She looked at Nora, then back at me, then at Nora again, with the specific calm of someone very pleased with the information she had just received. So you're the one she pretends to hate. The hallway went quiet. Nora closed her eyes once, slowly, like a woman asking the universe for patience it was not going to provide. The roommate smiled into her mug. Hi, I'm Jess. Daniel, I said. I know, she said, believe me. I looked at Nora. Her face had gone from the loose, soft expression she had been wearing all evening back to something closer to her work face, except there was a color in her cheeks that was not quite professional composure. I've heard your name approximately 700 times in the past 18 months, Jess said, usually followed by a specific noise. She made a sound with her teeth, like that. Nora, Jess. I'm just establishing context, Jess said. She looked at me. She's very good at pretending things. It's actually impressive. Nora set her keys on the small table by the door with great care. She turned to me. Thank you for the ride. I nodded. She was back to polished, not quite, but close enough. Her coat was still slightly off one shoulder. You're welcome. She held the door in a way that was the end of the conversation. I stepped back into the hallway. Jess lifted her mug in a small salute from across the apartment. Come back sometime, Daniel, when she's decided she doesn't hate you yet. The door closed. I stood in the hallway for a moment with the particular silence of a man who had just learned something and was still deciding what to do with it. I drove home with the radio off. The thing about working with someone for 2 years in a space that had no walls and bad acoustics was that you learned them whether you planned to or not. You knew their work habits before you knew their name properly. You knew they arrived at 8:15 and left at 6:30. You knew they had one specific mug they only used for tea. You knew they drafted presentations twice, once rough and once with the sharp version, and the gap between the two was where you could see how much they actually cared. You knew they went quiet in meetings when they had the strongest opinion, not because they were uncertain, but because they were building the sentence they meant to say before they let it out. I knew all of those things about Nora. I had watched them the way you watch traffic, not meaning to, just because it was there. What I had not known was that Jess existed, or that Nora talked about me to Jess, or that there was a word that apparently appeared 700 times in a year that was not colleague or competitor or that man from product or any of the other neutral terms I would have predicted. She pretends to hate you. That was a specific sentence. Jess had not said she doesn't know you or she finds you difficult. She had said pretends. I had been going through a stretch at work that I would not describe as my best. Not bad. I was not doing bad work. But I had been operating at a specific kind of low-level friction for most of the fall. The kind where things worked but nothing surprised you, where you knew how each day was going to go before it started and the accuracy of that prediction stopped feeling like competence and started feeling like a rut. I had chalked a fair amount of it up to the ambient competition with Nora, the way her presence had started to feel like a standard I was forever measuring against. Like keeping up with her had become a habit and I had stopped thinking about whether I was running towards something or just running because she was in the next lane. Jess's sentence knocked a hole in that whole structure. Because if Nora was pretending, then she was working at it, and Nora did not work at things she did not care about. I had 18 months of evidence for that. I went to work Monday morning with the specific feeling of a person who knows something they did not know on Friday and is not sure yet whether to do anything about it. Nora was already at her desk when I arrived. She was in her work configuration, coat hung up, hair in the knot, monitor on, mug of tea. She looked up when I walked past with the same expression she always used in the morning, composed. Precise, the exact face of a person who had made a professional decision about the weekend. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning." That was it. I sat at my desk. She went back to her screen. For 3 days, nothing changed. We were polite. We were professional. She challenged one of my points in a Tuesday meeting about the product roadmap, which was accurate and made the final version better, which I was not going to say out loud, but which I thought about afterward for longer than I was comfortable admitting. I held a door for her near the coffee station on Wednesday, and she said thank you, and we did not make eye contact for longer than normal. On Wednesday afternoon, she had a call at her desk that went longer than expected, and she turned her chair slightly away from the room the way she always did when a conversation required full attention, and I caught myself listening for the tone of it before I caught myself doing it and looked back at my own screen. That was the part that Jess's sentence had cracked open, not a feeling that had been hidden, a habit I had been calling something else. The thing about Nora was that she had never been easy to ignore. I had tried. In the first month especially, when I realized the performance rankings worked the way they did and that her name was going to be my permanent reference point, I had made a deliberate effort to treat her as background information. To take her seriously as a professional without spending more time on her than the job required. That had lasted approximately 3 weeks before I gave up and just started thinking of it as professional awareness, knowing your competition. Reasonable attention to someone who occupied the same professional lane. But professional awareness did not explain the 11 minutes it had taken me to find her shoe at the party, or the fact that I had noted the green dress, or the specific quiet in the car when she was asleep against the window and I had looked at her for 1 second too long at the red light. On Thursday, I found a sticky note on my desk when I came back from lunch, small, blue, in her handwriting, which was neater than it had any right to be given how fast she moved. It said, "Thank you for Saturday." I didn't say it properly. I looked across the room. She was on the phone, facing her window. Her shoulders were the shoulders of someone deliberately not looking over here. I wrote on the bottom of the sticky note, "You said it fine." Then I walked past her desk on the way to the printer and left it there without stopping. She did not look up when I passed. 20 minutes later, the note appeared back on my desk. She had added 3 words below mine. No, I didn't. That was a Thursday. Friday afternoon, the office was running thin. People had started slipping out at 2 under the general pretense of working from home, which was the kind of thing Greg noticed but pretended not to as a holiday gesture. By 4, it was mostly just the two of us and the guy from infrastructure who was always the last to leave for reasons no one ever asked about. Nora saved her file, closed a window on her screen, picked up her tea, and walked over to my desk, not to a desk nearby, mine. She stood on the other side of it. I watched her do it. "I'm not good at this," she said. "At what specifically?" She gestured between us, "This, whatever this is," saying things out loud instead of through the metric of who got the better quarterly review. I looked at her. "What do you want to say out loud?" She looked at her mug. "Jess is going to be impossible about this for months. Jess seems very informed." She said something under her breath that I thought might have been an understatement. Then she looked at me directly in that way she had when she was done calculating and had decided on the thing she was going to say. "I think you're the most frustrating person I have ever worked with," she said, and I have been using that as a reason to not think about the other things. I leaned back in my chair. "What other things?" She gave me a look. "Don't make me list them." "I'm serious, I want to know which things." She stood there for a moment. I could see the calculus happening, the same thing that happened in meetings right before she said something precise. "The way you listen to people when they're wrong without making them feel stupid about it," she said. "The way you come back to a problem after it should be done and fix the part that was only good enough. The fact that you found my shoe." The last one surprised a laugh out of me. She almost smiled. "And you never made it strange. That night you drove me home and found my shoe and walked me to my door, and you never once made it into something I had to feel embarrassed about." I didn't have a plan to make it strange. I know, that's the thing. We looked at each other across my desk in the mostly empty office on a Friday afternoon in December with bad overhead lighting and the sound of the infrastructure guy doing something several rows over. Then I said, "I have also been using the wrong label for things." She waited. I said, "I told myself it was competition. It was more useful than the other explanation." "Which is?" "That you are the most interesting person I have been in the same building with for 2 years, and I spent all of that time arguing with you because it was the only version of a conversation I could justify." Something in her face changed, not into surprise, into something more careful than that, like she had half expected this and was checking now whether she had expected it correctly. "You argued with me because my ideas needed it," she said. "Some of them." "Most of them." "Some," I said. "Some of them I argued with because it was the best part of the day." She was quiet for a moment. Her mug was still in both hands. She looked down at it, then up at me. "There's a place around the corner that makes good soup," she said. "I go there when the week has been too much. It's not a restaurant exactly. It's small. Nobody from the office has ever been there." I stood up slowly. "I have never been described as a soup person," I said, "but I am flexible." The corner of her mouth moved. "That is a sentence I will be thinking about for a while." I grabbed my coat. She got hers from her desk, and we walked out of the office together, down the elevator, through the lobby, out into the cold evening air that hit both of us at the same time and made her pull her coat closed and make a small sound about December that I thought was not technically a full word, but communicated something specific. The street was busy with people going home from the end of the week, everyone moving fast with their shoulders up. She turned left without checking if I was following. I followed. The soup place was 6 minutes away and looked exactly like she had described. Small, a hand-painted sign, 4 tables and a counter, the smell of something with garlic in it that had been going for hours. The woman behind the counter looked up when Nora came in and said without any preamble, "The usual." Nora looked at me. "Do you want the usual?" "I don't know what the usual is." "That's fine," said the woman behind the counter. "She can tell you." She looked at me with the expression of someone who had seen Nora come in alone many times and found the current arrangement worth noting without making a production of it. We sat at one of the small tables near the window. The street moved outside. The inside was warm enough that the edges of it felt soft. She unwound her scarf. I put my coat on the back of the chair. The soup arrived in 2 heavy ceramic bowls, and it was, genuinely, the best soup I had eaten in recent memory, which I told her, and she looked at me with the expression that meant she had known this and was pleased about it without being smug. She told me she had found this place in her first winter at the job. when things were difficult in a way she had not told anyone at work about because she did not believe in letting work see that kind of thing. What kind of thing? I said. She looked at the bowl. I was trying very hard to prove I was worth keeping, not to the company, to myself, and I had a rule that I wasn't allowed to go home until I felt like I had earned the day. This place was where I stopped before I went home, so I could eat something that wasn't rushed and think about whether the day had actually been as bad as I'd made it feel. Was it usually? Sometimes, she said, less often. After a while, she looked at me. You were there for most of the less often part. I turned that over for a second. Not because you made things easier, she said quickly, because you made things interesting enough that the hard parts stopped being the whole room. She looked slightly frustrated with herself. That sounded better in my head. It sounds fine, I said. It sounds like I'm crediting you for accidentally making my work life tolerable. You're crediting me for making it interesting. That's different. She looked at me. Is that better? Much. She was quiet for a moment, looking at the table. Outside, a couple walked past the window close together, the woman pulling her coat tighter, the man saying something that made her shake her head and then smile. Nora watched them without meaning to, then looked back at her bowl like she had caught herself. The first year was hard, she said, not in a dramatic way. In the ordinary way, things are hard when you're building something and nobody can see it yet and you can't always see it yourself. She paused. I used to look at you across the room and think, he makes this look lighter than it is, and I could not figure out if that was confidence or performance or if you genuinely just had an easier relationship with the work than I did. What did you decide? She looked up. That it was neither, that you were carrying the same weight and you just weren't announcing it. She held my gaze for a moment. That bothered me more than the other options. Why? Because I had been performing calm for so long I had started to think other people were performing it too, and you weren't. She picked up her spoon. You were just actually that steady, which made the pretending feel very loud. I looked at her. I did not know what to say to that, and I thought saying nothing was better than saying the wrong thing, so I let it sit. The soup was warm. The place was quiet. The week was over in the way Friday evenings always were, with the particular exhale of something released. After a while I said, I am not always that steady. She raised an eyebrow slightly. I said, the Henderson account. Fourth quarter last year, I had 3 nights where I stayed late enough that the building security guy and I were on a first-name basis and I still wasn't sure the pitch was right. She looked at me. Dave, she said. What? The security guard, his name is Dave. I know because I was also there those nights. I stared at her. 3rd floor conference room, she said. You were on the 5th. She picked up her soup again, straightforward about it like she was mentioning the weather. I said, you never said anything. She said, you seemed like you didn't want company. I did not have an answer for that. I looked at my bowl and thought about 3 nights in a row on the 5th floor with bad vending machine coffee and a pitch that kept being almost right, and Nora 2 floors below doing the same thing, and both of us leaving at separate times and never once saying a word about it in the morning. That is a lot of parallel suffering, I said. She almost smiled. We are both very good at parallel suffering. The soup went quiet for a moment. Outside, a delivery bike went past fast enough to rattle the windows slightly. She tracked it with her eyes, then looked back at me. Jess is going to ask me approximately 1,000 questions tonight, she said. I smiled. What will you tell her? She looked at me for a moment with that expression. The real one, not the professional version, not the composed one, the one that thought before it showed itself but let you see it when it got there. I'll tell her the truth, she said, which is that you are still the most infuriating person I have worked with, and also that dinner was good. I nodded once. You can add the soup part. She smiled, slowly and on purpose. That was the difference. The polite ones she used in meetings were fast, controlled, already closing by the time they appeared. This one arrived and stayed. We walked back to the office building afterward to get our things and go our separate ways for the weekend. At the corner where we had to split off, she stopped and turned. Monday, she said. What about it? She looked at me steadily. You're going to walk in and it's going to look exactly the same. And I'm going to be at my desk and you'll be at yours, and half the office is going to notice that something shifted and speculate incorrectly about it. Probably, I said. She nodded slowly. That part doesn't bother you. Not even a little. She thought about that, then she said, the presentation for the Henderson rollout is due in 3 weeks. I have a version I think is almost right. I looked at her, almost. It needs something and I don't know what it is yet. She paused. You're usually the one who finds the things I miss. That is the first time you have ever said that out loud. Don't make it strange. I'm not, I'm just noting it. She looked at the sidewalk, then at me. Do you want to look at it? Not Monday, this weekend. I said yes before she finished the question. She held my gaze for a moment longer than necessary, then she said goodnight and walked to her car. I watched her go. She did not look back, she did not need to. Monday was exactly what she predicted. She was at her desk. I was at mine. The office moved around us the way it always did, coffee cups and laptop sounds and Greg walking through with a face full of the week's agenda. Nobody said anything directly, but Marcus from the other side of the floor looked between us twice during the morning stand-up with the expression of a man rearranging a theory he had held for a while. We had spent Sunday afternoon in her apartment with the Henderson presentation spread across her kitchen table and Jess pointedly occupying a different room in a way that was extremely loud about being quiet. Nora walked me through her version. It was good. It was close. I found the thing that was missing in the second act where the data was right but the story around it didn't match the room it was being presented to. She listened. She did not immediately agree. She asked 3 questions. Then she rebuilt the section differently than either of us had suggested, and it was better than both. We worked for 3 hours and ate the leftover soup she had brought home in a container, and Jess came through the kitchen once, looked at us, said nothing, and left in the way of someone exercising enormous personal restraint. At the office on Monday, Nora sent me an email at 10 in the morning. It had the revised presentation attached and a single line of text at the top. It said, "Better, thank you. Also Jess says hi." I read it twice, then I wrote back 1 line. "Tell Jess I appreciate the context." I hit send. Across the room, I heard Nora make a small sound that I thought might have been a laugh that she had decided to suppress at the last second. She did not look up from her screen. I looked back at mine. Somewhere between the open bar at a company party and a bowl of soup on a Friday evening and a Sunday afternoon with a presentation that kept getting better, the rivalry had turned into something I did not have a cleaner word for yet. Not because it stopped being real, but because I had stopped pretending it was the whole thing. She was still precise, still early, still argued with my ideas in the specific way that meant she had already considered them further than I had. Still had pens organized by color for reasons I was going to find out eventually. And I was still the most infuriating person she had worked with. She was honest about that. The difference was that infuriating had stopped being the same thing as opposed, and that somewhere in a room with string lights and bad decisions, she had decided the truth mattered more than the performance. Jess had been right about one thing. It was an excellent piece of context. 3 months later, when people at the office asked how we went from that to this, Nora would say it was a work thing. I would say she lost a shoe. She rolled her eyes so specifically at that answer that 2 people standing nearby laughed before she explained it. And Jess, when she told the story to literally anyone who came to their apartment, always started it the same way. She said he rang the buzzer at 11 at night and she was pretending she wasn't relieved about it. And the version she told was probably the truest one. Because some things you know before you let yourself know them, and some rivalries are just the only conversation 2 people could find before they found the better one. What would you have done if your office rival turned out to be the person everyone else already knew you were paying attention to? And have you ever spent more energy competing with someone than it would have taken to simply say what you actually thought? Tell me in the comments. If this one hit, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.